So you want to own a sports betting app, no stores, no inventory, just an app and a bank account. Millions of people betting every single day. Football Sundays alone can generate more action than most businesses see all year. Sounds like the easiest money in modern finance. It isn't. It's one of the most brutally taxed, most heavily litigated businesses operating today. Let's start with how the money actually works. A sportsbook doesn't bet against you exactly. It builds odds designed to guarantee itself a profit, no matter who wins. That built-in profit margin is called the VIG, or the juice. It's baked into every single line on the board. On a simple point spread bet, you typically have to risk $110 to win $100. That extra $10 is the house's edge. Win or lose. Multiply that tiny edge across millions of bets a day, and the math becomes extraordinary. This isn't a rounding error kind of edge either. Applied at scale, a few percentage points of guaranteed margin on billions of dollars in handle turns into hundreds of millions in structural profit. Now here's where it gets genuinely clever. The real profit engine isn't single bets. It's parlays. A parlay combines multiple bets into one, with a payout that multiplies with each added leg. The math sounds great for the bettor. Win 5 legs, get a massive payout. The math is even better for the house. Combine 4 bets with a 5% house edge each, and the total edge compounds far higher than any single bet alone. That's not an approximation. That's how compounding works against you, not for you. Sportsbooks now push parlays constantly through the app interface. Pre-built, same-game combinations. One-tap parlay suggestions everywhere you look. This isn't an accident. Parlays typically carry the highest margins of any product on the platform. Industry data shows parlay hold rates, the percentage of total wagers the house actually keeps, running consistently higher than traditional straight bets. In some reported cases, parlay hold percentages have run more than double the hold on simple single-game bets. That gap alone explains why every app interface nudges you toward combining bets rather than placing them one at a time. So the app design itself is quietly steering you toward the bets that are worst for you and best for them. There's a second, quieter layer to this too. VIP programs for the highest spending customers. These bettors get personal account managers, exclusive bonuses, and higher betting limits than the average customer ever sees. A small number of these high-volume bettors can account for a disproportionate share of total handle on the platform. Keeping them engaged, even through losing streaks, is a core part of the retention strategy at every major operator. Now let's talk about acquiring a customer, because this is where the real spending war happens. When states legalized mobile betting, companies didn't compete on odds. They competed on free money, sign-up bonuses, bet and get promotions, risk-free first bets worth hundreds of dollars. This customer acquisition war got so expensive that some operators were spending more to acquire a single new bettor than that bettor might wager in their first year. 2 companies dominate this entire market in the United States. Together, they control the overwhelming majority of online sports betting revenue nationwide. In some major state markets, these 2 operators alone account for roughly 3/4 of all wagers placed. That kind of concentration means the entire industry's financial health effectively rides on just 2 companies' decisions. In 2024, one of the 2 major operators generated $491 million in revenue in a single major state. The other generated $418 million in that same state alone. That's just one state. Multiply that scale across dozens of legal markets, and you start to see why this became one of the fastest growing consumer industries in years. Quick pause here. If an industry that legally operates on a mathematical edge against its own customers sounds strange to you, subscribe now, because this channel breaks down one hidden business model every single week, and this one runs on math most bettors never see. Now here's the part that catches new operators off guard. States figured out how lucrative this industry is, and they want their share. Every legal sports betting market requires an operator to pay a percentage of gross gaming revenue directly to the state. Early tax rates were modest, often around 15% in many states. Then states with budget shortfalls started looking at sportsbook profits as an obvious place to raise money. One state moved from a flat 15% tax to a graduated structure ranging from 20% all the way up to 40%. That structure is based on how much revenue an operator generates. The 2 largest operators, the ones making the most money, automatically fall into that highest bracket. That's not a typo. 40% of gross gaming revenue before any other operating cost is paid. And that wasn't the end of it. The same state added something new, a per-wager tax, charged on every single bet placed, regardless of whether that bet wins or loses. 25 cents per bet for the first 20 million wagers a year. 50 cents per bet after that. The two largest operators blow past 20 million wagers almost immediately once football season starts. Combine the graduated revenue tax with the per-wager fee, and the effective tax rate for the biggest operators in that state has been estimated to climb past 30%. Heading toward 50 as the year progresses. Here's the structural trap sitting underneath this entire business. Your tax bill doesn't scale down when a customer bets less. It scales with the number of bets themselves. A customer placing 10 $1 bets costs you more in per-wager tax than a customer placing one $10 bet, even though the total money wagered is identical. This changes the entire incentive structure of the product. Suddenly, more bets isn't just more revenue. It's also more tax exposure per dollar of actual betting volume. So what did the operators do? They passed the tax straight to the customer. One major operator announced a 50-cent transaction fee on every single online wager placed in that state. It started right as football season began. Its biggest competitor followed with a similar surcharge. Though structured slightly differently based on bet size and customer loyalty tier, some smaller competitors chose a different approach entirely, setting minimum bet sizes instead of a flat per-wager fee. Either way, the underlying tax burden has to land somewhere, and it rarely lands on the operator's profit margin alone. Here's the part that reveals how this business actually thinks about its customers. The surcharge disproportionately affects small, casual bettors making $1 or $5 wagers. High rollers making $50 or $100 single bets barely notice a 50-cent fee. The casual weekend bettor notices immediately. Following the new fee, the average bet size in that state jumped sharply, up nearly 30% year over year. Meanwhile, the total number of individual bets placed dropped by around 15% in the same period. Read that again. Fewer bets, but each one bigger. The tax didn't reduce total betting activity as much as it reshaped who keeps betting and how. Smaller, more casual bettors, the ones least equipped to absorb losses, got pushed out, or pushed toward bigger, riskier wagers to make each bet worth the fee. This is exactly the outcome consumer protection advocates warned about when the tax was first proposed. Multiple other states are watching Illinois closely and considering similar tax hikes of their own. Maryland raised its tax rate. New Jersey raised its tax rate. Louisiana raised its tax rate. Ohio doubled its rate in one legislative session alone. Every one of these increases eats directly into operator margins in an industry that already spends enormous sums just acquiring each customer in the first place. One parent company reported $4 billion in quarterly revenue recently, up 16% year over year, but its net income for that same quarter collapsed to just $37 million, down sharply from the year before. Tax changes across several states were cited as a direct factor in that decline. Analysts estimated the new per-wager tax alone could reduce one major operator's projected earnings by tens of millions of dollars in a single year. That's the kind of swing that can happen even while total betting volume keeps climbing. Now here's the part that should genuinely worry anyone thinking about entering this business as an owner: the threat of the black market. If legal taxed apps become expensive enough for the customer, some bettors simply migrate back to unregulated offshore books. Those offshore books don't charge fees or report to anyone. That outcome is bad for everyone. The state loses tax revenue, the legal operator loses customers, and the bettor loses every consumer protection the legal market was designed to provide in the first place. One major operator's own executives said publicly they believed the new taxes would primarily hurt the industry's own tax base by pushing recreational bettors toward exactly that unregulated market. So the state raises taxes to capture more revenue and risks driving away the very activity it's trying to tax in the process. This is the tightrope every legal sports betting operator walks constantly. Squeeze customers too hard, and they simply stop playing on your platform at all. Now let's talk about a cost almost nobody outside the industry thinks about: problem gambling and the legal exposure that comes with it. Sports betting apps use sophisticated behavioral data to identify which customers bet the most, lose the most, and keep coming back despite mounting losses. Some of the most sophisticated apps in the industry have been reported to specifically target frequent, high-loss bettors. They do this with personalized promotions designed to keep them engaged. Consumer advocates and researchers have raised serious concerns about some of these marketing tactics. They argue the tactics functionally identify vulnerable bettors and push them toward riskier products, not away from them. This is where the legal exposure starts to build. Multiple states now require self-exclusion programs, mandatory limits, and problem gambling resources embedded directly into the apps. Failure to properly implement these protections has already triggered regulatory fines in several states. Class action lawsuits alleging predatory design and inadequate consumer protection have been filed against multiple major operators in recent years. None of these individually threatens to sink the industry. Together, they represent a growing legal cost center that barely existed a few years ago. This is the exact same pattern we've seen across other episodes on this channel, an industry built on a genuinely profitable mechanism. Sitting on top of a mounting pile of legal and regulatory risk it didn't fully price in at launch. Now let's run the numbers the way an actual operator has to run them. Say you're a mid-size regional operator generating $300 million in gross gaming revenue in a single state in a year. In a low-tax state, paying around 15% of that revenue in state taxes, you're looking at $45 million going straight to the state. In a high-tax state, like the one we just discussed, paying up to 40% plus the per-wager fee, your effective tax burden can climb past $120 million on that same revenue. That's a swing of roughly $75 million in tax cost on the exact same underlying betting volume, purely based on which state you're licensed to operate in. Now subtract customer acquisition costs, sign-up bonuses, promotional bets, and marketing spend routinely consume a significant share of gross revenue in any competitive market. Subtract payment processing fees, customer support infrastructure, and the compliance staff needed to satisfy dozens of different state regulatory frameworks simultaneously. Subtract the technology cost of running real-time odds engines, fraud detection, and responsible gambling monitoring tools across every single market you operate in. In a genuinely well-run, high-tax state, margins can be thin enough that profitability depends entirely on scale and parlay mix, not just total handle. In a favorable low-tax state with strong customer retention, the same operator can post genuinely attractive margins on the exact same betting product. The difference between the good state and the bad state isn't about how many people bet. It's about which legislature decided how much of that action belongs to the government. Let's talk about where this industry is actually headed, because the regulatory pressure keeps intensifying. More states are experimenting with per-wager taxes similar to the one we just walked through, rather than sticking with straightforward revenue-based taxation. If that model spreads to other large states, the entire industry's tax structure could shift meaningfully within just a few years. At the same time, states facing budget pressure have shown they're willing to revisit sports betting tax rates repeatedly, not just once at legalization. This creates genuine uncertainty for any operator trying to model long-term profitability in a specific market. You're not just betting on customer demand staying strong, you're betting that the tax rate you signed up under doesn't get rewritten again in 2 or 3 years. Meanwhile, competition for customers hasn't slowed down at all. New entrants keep trying to break into a market dominated by 2 enormous incumbents. Breaking that duopoly requires the exact same expensive customer acquisition strategy that built the 2 leaders in the first place, but with far less capital to sustain years of losses along the way. This is why so many smaller sports betting apps have folded, been acquired, or quietly exited individual state markets entirely in recent years. So is owning a sports betting app actually a good business? The honest answer depends enormously on regulatory geography and operating scale. In the optimistic scenario, you operate at massive scale across many states. With strong parlay engagement, disciplined customer acquisition spending, and favorable tax treatment in your biggest markets, margins can be genuinely excellent because the underlying mathematical edge built into the product is real. It repeats itself millions of times a day. In the realistic scenario, you're competing against 2 dominant incumbents with enormous marketing budgets, operating in states that keep raising taxes on exactly the revenue you're trying to grow. Your product's own design, pushing customers toward higher margin parlays, is simultaneously the thing regulators and lawsuits increasingly scrutinize as predatory. And unlike almost any other business we've covered, your core profit mechanism, a mathematical edge against your own customers, is precisely the thing generating the political pressure to tax and regulate you more heavily every single year. There is no version of this business where the state simply leaves you alone once you're profitable. Profitability is exactly what invites the next round of tax increases. The people who do well in this business aren't the ones who build the flashiest app. They're the ones who model regulatory risk as carefully as they model the odds themselves. Everyone else discovers, one legislative session at a time, that the house edge they built into the product can just as easily be built into the tax code against them. A sports betting app looks like the simplest business in modern finance from the outside. Build the odds, take the bets, collect the edge. From the inside financially, it's one of the most politically exposed businesses operating in America today. Not because the math is complicated, because the same mathematical edge that makes you profitable is exactly what makes you an obvious target for the next tax increase. The business isn't really the odds. It's how long the politics let you keep them.